Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at Discovery Preschool Center, which is a perfect example of what is at stake with regard to the governor's unconscionable line item vetoes of last week. Let me put this in context. I'm Steinberg, for those of you who don't know. I'm the President Pro Tem of the Senate and have the privilege of representing Senate District 6. Over the last several months, I was asked frequently why it was taking so long for us to reach a budget agreement with the governor. There are many reasons. Certainly, his lame duck status and failure to engage for many months was one of them. But the other answer from our end was that we made it clear we would use the power of no to stand on behalf of the kids here and their families. All summer long, the governor wanted us to agree to make devastating cuts to child care, to mental health services, and other programs designed to help abused and neglected children. And all summer long, we gave the same one-word response: no. We opposed the governor's cuts because they would not only put tens of thousands of children in harm's way, but also because these cuts would cost thousands of Californians their jobs and damage our economy. We saved a lot in this budget, even with the blue pencils. We saved health care, we saved community mental health funding, we saved in-home supportive services, we saved CalWORK's job training, and we actually increased per pupil spending for K-12 education and increased investment for higher education. So not all is lost. And yet, in order to achieve an alleged, and I'll explain that in a moment, the term alleged, an alleged prudent reserve, the governor blue penciled nearly $1 billion from the budget. Among his vetoes, and why we're here today, are nearly $500 million of cuts to vital services that single out working parents and children for particular harm. The vetoes eliminate essential funding for abused and neglected children, mental health services for 20,000 students, and child care for single-parent working families. The vetoes will place more children in harm's way, force working parents to forfeit their jobs by eliminating critical child care programs, and force more Californians who did not cause the economic crisis to unfairly bear its brunt. The governor's vetoes were misguided, cruel, unnecessary, and preventable. In the most backwards way to attack our 12.5% unemployment rate is to cut child care services for working families. That will only increase our unemployment rate. California is a few short months away from a new governor. We will finally see an end to this experiment, and we will start fresh. And we are here today to announce that we will not turn our backs. I will not turn my back on California's children and their families. My first action in January will be to work with our new governor to immediately restore these lost investments. Joining me today are those who know firsthand how these services not only keep our children safe and help families make ends meet, but how they are essential to our economy and how we will be affected both statewide and here specifically in Sacramento. You know what the vetoes were: $80 million to child welfare services. That means that at least 700 county child welfare social workers across the state may be laid off. That translates to 143,000 reports of abuse and neglect that can't get done with that kind of layoff. That means that 20,400 kids cannot be timely reunited with their families, where that is the right result. I talked a moment about the mental health issue and how that affects kids in school. 132 million. Potentially affect 20,000 children, although it still remains a federal mandate. Where is the money to pay for the services? And of course, this stage 3 child care issue, as we refer to it in the legislative lexicon, what it means is child care for parents who have left assistance and who are working and who are trying to become a permanent part of California's workforce. The cut translates to 81,000 children whose parents may not be able to keep their jobs. In Sacramento County alone, it is estimated that almost 1,500 families would lose child care. That's 2,800 plus children. 407 child care providers, like the place we're here today, would lose this significant investment. And so, as always, though the burden is on those who can least afford it now, we wanted to come out, and I wanted to come out early and say that just as the governor had that silly clock outside of his office during the course of the budget crisis, we have our own clock running right now. And it's a clock that takes us to the beginning of January. A fresh start. A new governor. Someone who understands that we need to encourage those who have re-entered the workforce to stay in the workforce. A governor who understands the challenges. And we will work to make this the first order of business to restore these investments. I want to introduce Patty Siegel, the Executive Director of the Child Care Resource and Referral Network, Danielle Escali, a working mother of 3 children, and a recipient of the Stage 3 CalWORks Subsidized Child Care, Frank Mecca, who you all know from the County Welfare Directors Association, Christina Davis-Clark from the Sacramento chapter of the California Youth Connection, one of the great advocacy groups in California, and Hillary Gaines, whose son was a recipient of the 3632 services, and we'll talk about what this means to her and other parents like her. Please, let's take the first speaker, Patty. Patty Siegel, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Steinberg. It's incredibly encouraging to hear your strong response to these unconscionable cuts. When we got this news Friday, at a convenient time when the press wasn't yet alert to what the blue pencil could do, I can only tell you that across this state, parents, child care providers, and advocates were reeling. We were at every budget hearing, along with leadership, all year long, parents at every hearing saying it is child care that keeps California working. It is that small child care subsidy in Stage 3 that means that people who are earning an average statewide of $24,000 a year, because yes, the jobs that people can get when they're coming off of welfare aren't always the highest paying jobs. So think about it. You make an average of $24,000 a year. You have an infant or toddler like the little ones that we see over here, and the average cost of infant toddler care can be between $10,000 and $12,000 a year. November 1st, which is when this horrible reduction goes into place, November 1st, parents like Daniela have to figure out where 67% of their family budget is going to go. I mean, if they have to pay the full cost of childcare, it means that they have to make very hard choices. And if they're making those choices, whether or not they're able to keep the jobs that they worked hard to get, our CalWORks program worked. These families, more than 60,000 of them, got jobs, and they've kept those jobs. But when you pull childcare out from under them, the whole thing is on quicksand, and it really is ready to implode. And it's not just the parents who are affected, it's the more than 15,000 childcare providers, centers like Discovery Tree, licensed family childcare providers, and family, friends, and neighbors exempt care providers who care for the 81,000 children that we're talking about. Those jobs are at risk because I think you all know that in this economy, people are just hanging on by threads. You pull out 10 kids, 15 kids, 20 kids, even in a small family childcare home, 2 kids, and the whole fabric of that program is threatened. So in my 40 years as a childcare advocate, we have never, ever faced a cut of this magnitude in California. The last time I can remember this kind of threat was 1972 when Caspar Weinberger proposed something at the federal level. And I remember that to protest that, and we did change it, and I hope we don't have to do this again, we delivered decapitated dolls to the federal building in San Francisco. I hope that we don't have to resort to those kind of dramatic actions now, but I want everyone here to know that parents and their providers are ready to fight back. This is about the future of California. This is about our economy. This is about jobs. And we are not going to take this sitting down or lying down. We are standing up. We are ready to fight. And parents and providers across the state are mobilizing everywhere they can. You'll hear from us. You'll hear from them. But I'm really proud now that one of those parents who is affected, who will lose childcare for her 2 children November 1st, is here. And Danielle? It's Danielle Escali from Sacramento.
Hi, my name is Danielle Escali. I have 3 children, a 12-year-old son, and twins that are 3. When I was 17, I got pregnant. I was kicked out of the home and disowned by my family. By 19, I was homeless, staying with whoever had an extra couch to sleep on. I was on welfare and had a 1-year-old son. I decided that living on welfare in the ghetto was not how I was going to raise my kids. I worked 2 jobs and eventually got a place I could call home, a car, and most important, my self-esteem back. Over the last few years, I have made huge accomplishments in my life. I do not receive any cash aid, food stamps, or Medi-Cal. The only state assistance I receive is subsidized childcare through Stage 3 CalWorks. I work a full-time job as a contract administrator and HR generalist for a local landscaping company. I have been with the company for over 4 years. I also attend American River College at night to obtain my business degree. I put in a lot of long days and nights trying to work as hard as I can to get ahead in life. At the same time, I am instilling values in my children so that they know it is a strong work ethic that they must have. They will not be raised to sit around and wait for a handout from anyone. But if I am forced back on welfare, what example will I be to my children? If I have to incur the full cost of child care, once that is paid, I am left with $500 a month to pay rent, bills, and put food on the table for my kids. Without the subsidized child care I receive, I will be forced to quit my job. Due to the economy and business downsizing, I have worked very hard to keep my job over the last couple of years. But now I feel like all the hard work I put into becoming a contributing citizen is wasted because in the end, I am forced to quit my job and go back on welfare. I feel that I am a success story. I don't ever want to be on welfare again. To me, welfare is not a way of life, but a stepping stone that I used to get to where I am today. I thought that's what welfare was for. But the message I got when Arnold line item vetoed Stage 3 childcare was why even try to get off of welfare? Because when you've done all they asked, the end result is starting all over at Stage 1, on welfare with the state paying to take care of you and your children. I don't want a handout from welfare. I want to work and make a good life for my children. I did everything the state asked me to do. I followed every rule, and now when all I need is help paying with childcare for a couple more years, I'm going to get the rug pulled out from underneath me. It's just not fair and doesn't make any sense. What message are they sending to us? I'm asking every legislative official to see and understand the detrimental effects of cutting child care. Please stand against this and reverse Arnold's act. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Frank Meck. I'm the Executive Director of the County Welfare Directors Association. On behalf of the 58 county human service agencies in the state today, I want to thank Senator Steinberg for inviting me to speak, although we are deeply saddened by the reason that we're all gathered here today. With the stroke of his pen, Governor Schwarzenegger heartlessly cut $133 million from child welfare services. Senator Steinberg spoke about the general fund portion, $80 million, but in doing so, we're forfeiting $53 million in federal funds at the same time that the governor complains that California isn't getting its due from Washington. In making the veto, the governor jeopardized the safety and well-being of tens of thousands of abused and neglected children. These are children that the state assumes the highest legal and moral responsibility for. We intervene in their lives, hopefully, if we have the resources, and we assume a parental obligation. And with this veto, the governor is putting tens of thousands of children in harm's way. The governor's veto also drips with hypocrisy and cruelty for reasons that I'll talk about in a second. But let's talk about what this means. 700 Child Protective Services workers who are on the front lines, who investigate allegations of abuse and neglect. They intervene and take children out of harm's way. They try to find permanent loving homes, reunified with their families if possible, safely, otherwise in another permanent situation. That's a huge cut to our capacity, which is already limited due to funding cuts that have made in the past. We've been down this catastrophic road before, and we know the consequences. The governor should know the consequences as well. He vetoed child welfare money last year. We know we are doing worse at serving these children. We know we're doing worse at preventing the heartbreaking stories of children being left in unsafe homes. Here's a glimpse of what we're experiencing. Children are waiting in foster care limbo far too long, hoping to be safely reunified with their families when possible or placed in permanent homes. We know children are being moved more frequently. We know we're not reunifying them as quickly as we should. We know children are bouncing around in foster care. And every study ever done on child abuse and neglect in child welfare services concludes that the future prospects of children who are in foster care limbo rather than permanent situations declines significantly. Everyone in the child welfare community knows this. The governor should know it too. Children's health is at risk. What we're finding in the statistics from the state's data center is the percentage of children getting timely health exams is steadily dropping. These are children often with significant physical and mental health needs, but we simply don't have the capacity to follow up, monitor the well-being of youth, and make sure that they're getting health care services and other services they need, not just to stay safe, but to thrive as adults. Perhaps most frightening for the county human service administrators in the state, we know child safety has been compromised. Calls to the hotline aren't being investigated as quickly as they should in too many cases. We know emergency response is slower than it should because we simply don't have the capacity. We know that the proportion of cases where kids are visited monthly, as required by regulations, has been dropping. This is all data that the administration has had. This is all clearly linked to cuts that he's made in the past. We all know, tragically, what happens if a system can't respond timely and thoroughly. The governor's veto also cut stipends for foster youth who are aging out of the system. Small amounts of money for housing or transportation or educational expenses that often are the difference between homelessness or housing, the difference between staying in school or dropping out, the difference between keeping a job or becoming unemployed, completely wiped out with the stroke of the governor's pen. The legislature showed their bipartisan commitment to abused and neglected children when they restored the child welfare services cut the governor made last year. Republicans agreed. Democrats agreed. Every group in the state that understands the moral and legal obligation to these children agreed. But the governor showed his true colors with the veto. Not only was it senseless and cruel, the governor's veto showed him to be a hypocrite. Just last week, during the signing ceremony for AB 12, Assembly Bill 12, which extended foster care support to youth up to the age of 21, Governor Schwarzenegger said, and I quote, that he has always been very committed to children. And he talked about, and I quote, how little it costs to care for our foster children. We're chilled at the thought of how many young people will never be able to take advantage of AB 12 because the child welfare system that was heartlessly cut did not have the capacity to take them out of harm's way. To the governor, human service directors in the state ask, what happened in the days between professing your dedication to foster children and the reprehensible slashing of services to protect them? How is a crisis of children suffering and dying every day not a priority to you? I'm gratified by the pro tem's announcement today, and we're really hopeful that with the legislature's help, Democrats and Republicans in the legislature, we can move quickly to restore this funding under a new administration that recognizes its role and responsibility in protecting and improving the lives of our most vulnerable children. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Davis-Clark, and I'm here representing the California Youth Connection. I'm part of the Sacramento chapter. And I'm also representing the thousands of current and former foster youth, like myself in California, that's been affected by the governor's $80 million cut, which is actually a $133 million cut when we consider the $53 million federal matching funds that are lost with this cut. Foster youth enter the system due to no fault of their own and rely on our government to be responsible parents and provide us a better situation than the one we was removed from. Since this cut was made in 2009, through a collaborative effort with other organizations, we gathered information on how the cut has affected our youth across the state. We learned that hundreds of social workers were laid off, programs to keep children safely in their homes were cut, family reunification programs were also cut, and these are just a few examples of some of the programs we really need that were cut. To sum all these cuts up in 2 words, our future is being cut. These cuts mean that less children and families across the state receive support that they need. Excuse me. Foster care is supposed to be a short-term situation used in situations where children cannot safely be returned home. These cuts have moved California in the wrong direction and put more risk on children. This state has one of the biggest economies in the world, and I believe that we can do better by our youth by providing the services necessary. I know that we have hard budget times, and families must usually decide how to adjust their budget. But items that put children at risk are the last things that need to be cut. Our state should do the same and become better parents for the 80,000 foster youth in our care. Thank you.
Good morning. First, I want to thank you, Senator Steinberg, for holding this event and shining light on the negative impact the governor's veto actions have had on thousands of vulnerable children, families, and throughout California. My name is Hillary Gaines, and I'm the Community Development Manager for EMQ Families First Capital Region. In my previous role as Parent Involvement Coordinator at Families First, I worked hand in hand with parents to help them get the educationally necessary mental health services their children needed to succeed in school and life. On a daily basis, I see parents struggling to get their kids the services they so desperately need from the educational system. AB 3632 was created because parents were unable to access quality mental health services and therapeutic residential school placements for their children without surrendering them to the foster care system. It has reduced the needless suffering and long-term damage to the health and well-being of many children and youth and their families by meeting the need of students for therapy, day treatment, and residential mental health services which were previously ignored. We all know that our educational system is already overburdened, trying to provide complex educational services to our kids. We shouldn't add complex mental health care to the things we ask them to do, particularly when we have a mental health system in place already. Suspending AB 3632 will return California to a practice of underserving these kids and families until other more costly and intrusive services, such as hospitalization or incarceration in juvenile justice systems or institutionalization occur. Now that's my professional opinion, based on my professional experience, but my most important role is as a mom. My son needed and was provided mental health services through AB 3632. Excuse me. When my son was in 4th grade, I requested services of the school district and I was denied initially. I had to fight for 3 years to get my son the services he so desperately needed. By the time he received AB 3632 services, he was failing in school, unable to focus or complete assignments, and was aggressive towards other kids when he was hurt or angry. Even with services, my son continued to have a difficult time. But I'm very, very proud to tell you today that my son graduated with a diploma. He met all the educational requirements and graduated from high school. Without AB 3632 services, I believe that he would be dead or in jail or in an institution. And my son has recently told me himself that if I had not intervened and gotten him the services, he knows he would be dead today. We need this program so young people like my son and the hundreds of youth and families that get support through this program every day can succeed in school, remain united with their families, and have a good chance to succeed in life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hillary, and thank you to all of you for your advocacy and for sharing your compelling stories, because as we've often said, budgets are not just about numbers. They're about real lives, and here is the evidence. I did leave one thing out. I did say in my remarks that the governor talked about an alleged prudent reserve, and I want to tell you what I mean by that. The child care cut of over $250 million is straight out of Proposition 98. That money sits in the Prop 98 account. It's not in a prudent reserve. It can't be in a prudent reserve. So this awful, unconscionable cut, and it doesn't even create the very reserve that justified or allegedly justified the governor's actions. I'd be happy to stand for questions, as would any of the advocates.
And to what extent were the blue pencil cuts discussed during the budget negotiations, or were these ideas floated, or was
Yes.
it broad side?
No, these we presented the governor a list of items that we believed were worthy of protection, and these items were on the list. The governor did not make any ironclad deal promises on the list, but that's sort of besides the point. We negotiated an agreement, and he ultimately has the constitutional authority to blue pencil, but he also has the responsibility to make sure that he uses that blue pencil in a way that is judicious and in a way that is compassionate. And this is gratuitous. You know, $1.5 billion reserve instead of $1 billion reserve. We all know we're going to have, budget challenges next year. It's not necessary. Absolutely not necessary. And we did present these issues to him very strongly.
Do you feel like he reneged on a deal that you guys made?
No, I'm not going to. Last year he did. I wouldn't. This is a different category. The blue pencil cuts are callous, they're cruel, and they were unnecessary. And yet we know in the end that, again, I put it in some context because we saved a lot in this budget. And there's a lot that he did not blue pencil, and I've illustrated some of those things earlier. But in the end, the duly elected governor of the state of California has the responsibility to stand up for all people, and especially those people who need help the most. And in this instance, he failed. No. Obviously not. I'm not, at this point seeking an ironclad commitment from either candidate. They're running for governor. Let them run. And, of course, I hope Jerry Brown wins because I think we'll have a much better chance. I'm speaking as the leader of the state Senate, that we're going to pursue this agenda aggressively from the very first day that the new governor is in office. Kevin?
Did you not seek an ironclad deal on preventing any kind of...
Oh, of course we did. Yes.
Given what he did last year,
of course.
Did you assume that he would do something of this nature?
We knew that there would be some blue pencil cuts. We also knew that we had negotiated $7.5 billion, and if he got up, for example, to $8 billion, that there would be $500 million worth of cuts. But as you notice, among the blue pencils were $400 million of really an accounting change around CalWorks, where we can substitute some federal money for the state money. So if he had done that and $100 million more, and we would have been left with $1 billion reserve, okay, we would have walked away and we could have lived with that. The fact that he went another $500 million deeper is what's at issue, because that's what these stories are all about.
Last year, the blue pencil cuts were directly related to the Assembly's failure to pass
right.
the oil drilling, T-Ridge, and the Huda.
I remember it all too well. Yeah.
Was there anything that happened this year that set him off?
No, I don't think so. I know that there was some talk about the transportation trailer bill, and we all know the story there, but the fact of the matter is, the administration, I think we'd acknowledge to you that they're still going to score the $110 million out of that transportation trailer bill, because it was also reflected in the main budget bill. So it wasn't like we were $110 million short because of that controversy.
Would you need Prop 25 to reverse some of these cuts?
Not sure. We're researching now, given the fact that the child care piece is straight out of Proposition 98. Of course, you can appropriate education dollars, Prop 98 dollars, with a majority vote. So we believe we can use a majority vote whether Prop 25 passes or not. Certainly for, some of the other issues, it may require a 2/3 unless Prop 25 passes. Certainly, Prop 25 passing and the right governor getting elected will be important pieces of following through here. But again, all I can do as one leader of one house is to say that we are going to make this our first priority when we reconvene, and the clock is ticking.
The Assembly Leader, John Perez, would you
John, I know, put out a very strong statement after the blue pencil cuts, and very consistent with all I'm saying here. Okay? Thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it.